I'm curious, we talked a little bit about your personal background, which is really interesting, but also, just when you think about your job, what is it that keeps you up at night?
The mountains of things that need to get done. Or really more is like, what is the thing that you think about when you're like in the shower and you're like, oh man, this hot water feels so good, and oh wait, but this thing about work just popped into my brain. That's usually like a kind of like an executive director inside joke. It's like, man, you can't go anywhere without thinking about different people. The thing that keeps me up at night is that not everyone is on the same page. How can we get people to understand this stuff? How can I be more simple in my message to help people understand what's going on? How can we respectfully create context amongst groups so we can move things forward? That's kind of the thing, like that's frustrating stuff. And sometimes the stories about students, truly. I had a student who, and I might talk a little bit about Blue Lake, but we sent 22 students to Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp last summer on scholarships, WMCAT students. And I'll never forget when I went to Blue Lake for 4 years. I went as a dancer. I was trained as a dancer most of my life. And I'll never forget this big school bus that came from Detroit and dropped off kids from the inner city at camp. They didn't have proper luggage, they had used uniforms that had stains on them, and then when they came to the dance classes, they did not have the technique that most of us did. Most of us danced at least 4 days a week, took private lessons. Our whole life was speaking in that language and living in that context. And the other thing was we had mail call, or we had flag raising every day. We knew the songs because they were songs that our parents sung to us. They were the silly songs our parents sung, like Going on a Bear Hunt, like all those things. We knew those things. Those students did not. And when they did mail call, my parents would they would sneak me donuts and send me donuts in the mail in my care package, because I'm like, I'm starving at camp. They don't feed the dancers. So my parents would send me donuts. But the other kids got care packages too. But these students did not get care packages. It wasn't because their parents didn't care about them, but maybe their parents didn't know that this is what happens when a kid goes to camp. They get a care package or a letter in the mail. And that it's a big deal when they call out people's names and you run up to go get your mail and see what those little love notes are from home. And I saw those students withdraw and not enjoy camp at the same level that I did. And then at the end of camp, we had our dance performance, and the bus came and picked them up. The school bus came and picked them up. No parents came to see that end of the session recital, and they went back to where they were from. And when WMCAT had the opportunity to send 22 kids to camp with a scholarship from the Steel Case Foundation, I was personally determined that we aren't going to let happen, because this still happens. This is kind of what happens. Like, well, why did they go to camp? They had a full-ride scholarship because they didn't have context to be successful, or they heard from someone else that they felt like a fish out of water, or that it was too quiet at camp, and it's like creepy because it's so quiet. It's not like the city. So what we decided to do at WMCAT was create a way for context to occur for our students to be successful and at least start on some equal footing as the art students who would also be at Blue Lake. So we selected the students who would go to Blue Lake in January for the June departure. And we added an additional day of class after school for them to build camp context. And it was the only class that I felt like I was qualified to teach at WMCAT. I'm a total administrator through and through, but it was the one thing that I was like, I can do a crash course in all things camp and all things surface level art, so that when they go to camp and the student can easily identify the difference between an impressionist painting and pop art, they don't feel like, well, how did that student know the difference between a Warhol and a Van Gogh? We wanted them to be able to tell those differences as well. We also wanted them to be comfortable sitting at all those evening performances that happen every night at Blue Lake. At Blue Lake, they have symphonies come from Germany, even things like a barbershop quartet. We wanted our students to experience those things before going to camp, so that sitting outside and not moving for 2.5 hours was something enjoyable and not something foreign. So the Civic Theater and Broadway Grand Rapids provided free tickets for our students to experience the theater. So when they went to camp, they had context. So that's the backstory. Here's the student story. One of our students selected on that is Gladys. Gladys was born in the United States, and her parents are not in the United States legally. She is a student who, when she comes to WMCAT, she's amazing, but she's kind of in and out of school. She's 16 years old. Gladys told us 2 weeks before going to camp, I'm not going to be able to go to camp. My parents are going back to Mexico. It's not safe for them anymore here. And I have to get married or I have to go to Mexico. That's what my orders are from my parents. So I can't go to camp because I've decided that I'm going to marry my 18-year-old boyfriend so I can still live in the United States where I'm a citizen. I've never been to Mexico and I don't know what that life is like. And we're like, okay, but you still gotta go to camp. You know, like, we don't want you to miss out. You've worked so hard. You're a great student. She says, but I'm getting married on Saturday and camp starts on Sunday. And we're like, well, get married on Saturday. I mean, we weren't there to make a judgment about what her life situation was, but we wanted her to be the 16-year-old that, you know, a 16-year-old who worked really hard for an opportunity, and we just wanted her to go have fun and see a little bit of a different perspective. So we convinced Gladys, she got married on Saturday, and we picked her up along with the other 22 kids, and all of the WMCAT staff individually went and checked the students into camp. And I checked in Gladys into her cabin, and one of the students came up, and at Blue Lake you get these buttons, and she's their name tag buttons. She's like, hi, my name is Brittany. You can see on my name tag right here, my name's Brittany. And here's the deal with the name tags. If you have a boyfriend or whatever back home, you wear your name tag upside down to let people know that you're taken. But if you're, you know, whatever, you just leave it right side up. And Gladys says, well, what if you're married? And Brittany said, well, I guess that just means you wear it upside down. And Gladys felt instantly comfortable. There was no judgment. It was fun. She had the greatest time ever. And when we picked her up 2 weeks later, she had been nominated by every kind of department, whether it's orchestra, art. Gladys had been nominated by all of her peers in the arts major as camper of the session. And that meant the world to her. And when I was giving her a ride home, she said, I forgot for 2 weeks how hard my life is in Grand Rapids and I don't want to go back. She said, I got to see something totally different. I got to hear about what other people's lives are who are from other cities. And she's like, man, this is, I don't know what to do. And we dropped her off at home. And usually we don't give kids rides home, but we dropped her off at home. And her family was not there anymore. They're not in the United States anymore. And she went into, we dropped her off, she accesses her apartment that she lives in with her, 18-year-old boyfriend. She accesses her home through an alley. Because who's gonna rent to, a 16 and an 18-year-old, except for maybe someone whose housing is located in an alley with a door that's just a piece of particle board on a hinge. That is where Gladys went after camp. And so those are the things that keep me up. But when she was there, she felt free to explore what's possible. And we sent them care packages. And in fact, people who didn't even know them in Grand Rapids, this group called the Super Friends made sure that they had the coolest stuff for camp. They had sleeping bags and all the right toiletries and bug spray. And they all wrote them letters saying, we're proud that you're doing this. You're doing something really cool. Camp is awesome. So when mail call came, they had letters. So it was about creating context for her, but what she went home to, that was tough. So the questions, and the things that keep me up is like, man, we provided this great experience, but there's a bigger problem here. There's lots of things attached to just that one story. Cool. See you guys in a few minutes.